Amidst the cold glow of a convenience store's neon lights, Lee Soo-jin, with tired yet determined eyes, wiped the floor for the third time that night. Each movement was a silent echo of the hospital debt suffocating her family, a burden too heavy for her young shoulders, yet one she carried with an almost supernatural resilience for her younger brother. Suddenly, the door burst open, revealing Park Ji-yeon, a spoiled heiress, who in a fit of boredom and arrogance deliberately knocked over a stack of snacks and a cup of iced coffee, scattering chaos across the aisle. "Clean this up, you useless thing," she sneered, throwing a banknote at Soo-jin's face, who merely bowed in silence, humiliation burning on her cheeks. Outside, in the dark interior of his luxury car, CEO Kim Do-hyun observed every detail, his eyes, usually cold and calculating, fixed on Soo-jin's bowed figure, not on her beauty, but on the silent strength emanating from her. He saw not a victim, but a warrior, and in that instant, a decision was made, an invisible thread connecting their destinies. The smell of iced coffee and crushed snacks hung in the air, mingling with the persistent aroma of disinfectant. Lee Soo-jin, kneeling on the cold floor, felt the humiliation burn more fiercely than the fatigue in her muscles. The crumpled banknote, thrown with contempt, still lay there beside a stray potato chip. She picked it up, not for its value, but to clear away the mess Park Ji-yeon had left, both physical and emotional. Each movement was a silent echo of urgency, of her mother's faint breath in the hospital, of her younger brother's hopeful gaze. The debt, an invisible monster, whispered in her ears, demanding more, always more. Outside, in the dark interior of his luxury car, CEO Kim Do-hyun was not a man of impulse. His empires were built on cold calculation and ruthless decisions. But something in Soo-jin's bowed figure, in the dignified quietness with which she endured the affront, had pierced his armor. He saw not weakness, but a silent strength, a resilience few possessed. That woman, he realized, was a survivor, and he needed a survivor. His driver, a robust and discreet man, received the order with an almost imperceptible nod. In a few minutes, the convenience store door opened again, but this time without the arrogant bang from before. A man in an impeccable suit, a leather briefcase in hand, entered. Soo-jin, still on the floor, looked up, expecting another reprimand, another demand. But the man's gaze was different. There was no contempt, only professional seriousness. "Lee Soo-jin?" His voice was calm, but firm. She nodded, confused, the cleaning cloth still in her hands. "My name is Cheol. I am CEO Kim Do-hyun's chief of staff." He paused briefly, allowing the information to sink in. "CEO Kim would like to make you an offer." Soo-jin frowned. An offer? She barely had time to sleep, let alone consider proposals from strangers in expensive suits. Her world was the smell of car wax, the hot steam of the laundry, and the cold glow of neon lights. "He observed you," Cheol continued, his gaze sweeping over the chaos Ji-yeon had left. "He saw your dedication, your resilience. He believes you possess rare and valuable qualities." Soo-jin's mind reeled. Dedication, resilience. She was just trying to survive. The humiliation still stung, but now a cautious, suspicious prick of curiosity stung her. "CEO Kim is looking for a personal assistant," Cheol explained, opening his briefcase. "It's a demanding position, with long hours and significant responsibilities, but the remuneration is substantial, enough to cover your mother's medical expenses and secure your brother's future." The mention of her mother and brother hit Soo-jin like an electric shock. The air seemed to thin. She stood up, the cloth forgotten, her eyes fixed on Cheol. Was it a trap, a cruel deception? Her life was a constant struggle, and now, out of nowhere, a promise of relief so great it seemed unreal. "Why me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice hoarse. I wash cars. I clean convenience stores. Cheol allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. CEO Kim doesn't look for impeccable resumes, Miss Lee. He looks for character. He looks for someone who won't bend, no matter how heavy the burden. He saw that in you today. Outside, in the silence of his car, Kim Do-hyun observed the scene. The convenience store light illuminated Soo-jin's face, revealing a complex mixture of shock, distrust, and perhaps a spark of hope. He knew the offer was audacious, almost unthinkable for someone in her position. But he also knew that life was a game of chess, and he had just moved an unexpected piece. Cheol's proposal wasn't just a job. It was a bridge to a world Soo-jin had never imagined. A world of gleaming offices, armored cars, and decisions that shaped empires. But it was also a world of sharks, where innocence was a weakness and trust a dangerous luxury. The starting salary is 10 million won a month, Cheol said, his voice low, but the number echoed like thunder in the small space. With performance bonuses and benefits that include full medical coverage for your family. 10 million won. It was more than she earned in 3 months, maybe 4 with all her odd jobs. It was freedom for her mother, a chance for her brother's future. But at what cost? What did a man like Kim Do-hyun truly want in exchange for such generosity? The image of Park Ji-yeon with her casual contempt flashed in her mind. The world of the rich was a cruel place, and Soo-jin knew that from experience. I need time to think, Soo-jin stammered, her mind in a whirl. Cheol nodded. Understandable. Here is CEO Kim's card. He expects your call by late morning tomorrow. Be warned, Miss Lee, he is not a man to wait. He placed an elegant business card in Soo-jin's palm. The paper was thick, the ink embossed. Kim Do-hyun, CEO. The name seemed to weigh in her hand. As Cheol turned and left as silently as he had arrived, Soo-jin stood there, motionless. The smell of coffee and snacks was still there, but now it seemed muffled by the magnitude of the offer. The humiliation of minutes ago had been replaced by overwhelming anxiety. She looked at the card, then at the dark street, where Do-hyun's luxury car was already pulling away, its taillights disappearing into the night. That night, which began with the deepest of humiliations, ended with an impossible promise, an invitation to an abyss of uncertainty, but also, perhaps, the only way out of her own personal hell. The weight of the decision was almost unbearable, but her mother's pale, fragile face and her brother's innocent smile were images that demanded a response. Soo-jin's war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the battlefield, she suspected, would be far more dangerous than any car wash or convenience store floor. The business card in her hand felt like it was burning. Kim Do-hyun, CEO. The name, once just a whisper of power in newspaper articles she never read, was now a heavy anchor, pulling her into an abyss of uncertainty. 10 million won. That number danced in her mind, a seductive and dangerous melody. It was the cure for her mother, the future for her brother, freedom from a burden that had crushed her since she could remember. But at what cost? Soo-jin folded the card and tucked it into the pocket of her worn jeans, as if she could hide the magnitude of that offer from the world or from herself. The smell of coffee and snacks still lingered, a cruel reminder of Ji-yeon's humiliation, but now it was suffocated by a stronger aroma, that of fear mingled with desperate hope. She finished cleaning the floor, each movement mechanical, as her mind raced in circles. Why her? A car washer, a convenience store cleaner. What did a CEO of an empire want with someone like her? Cheol's phrase, he looks for character, he looks for someone who won't bend, no matter how heavy the burden, echoed. Was it a trap? A cruel game by a powerful man who amused himself with others' misery? The world of the rich, she knew, was a labyrinth of appearances and hidden intentions. Her experience with Ji-yeon was proof of that. The night dragged on. Soo-jin finished her shift, her body exhausted, but her mind ablaze. At home, the small apartment was silent, except for her brother's soft breathing and the distant hum of her mother's oxygen machine. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching the pale, fragile face of the woman who gave her life. Every line of worry, every sign of pain, was a dagger in her heart. The hospital debt was an insatiable monster, and she, Soo-jin, was the only one who could feed it or kill it. Kim Do-hyun's card seemed to vibrate in her pocket. 10 million. It was the chance to see her mother smile without pain, to see her brother go to a good school, to have a future that wasn't a constant struggle for survival. But what if the price was too high? What if the dedication and resilience Do-hyun saw in her were just tools for his own ends? To be crushed and discarded like a dirty cleaning cloth? She spent the night awake, her eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. Images mingled, Ji-yeon's mocking smile, Cheol's serious face, the cold gleam of Do-hyun's luxury car. She thought of all the times she had bowed, swallowed humiliation, worked to exhaustion. She thought of the promise she had made to herself to protect her family, no matter the cost. At dawn, the shy sun peeked through the window, painting the room in shades of grey and blue. Cheol's deadline hung like a sword over her head. "He is not a man to wait." His voice was a relentless reminder. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach, but hopelessness was an even greater enemy. She had nothing left to lose, except the dignity that had already been trampled so many times. With trembling hands, Soo-jin picked up her old cell phone. Kim Do-hyun's business card seemed to pulse in her palm. She dialed the number, each digit a strong beat in her chest. The sound of dialing was a drum roll, announcing the beginning of a battle she didn't know how to fight. A polite, distant female voice answered. "CEO Kim Do-hyun's office. How may I help you?" I am Lee Soo-jin," she stammered, her voice hoarser than she expected. "I received a card from Mr. Cheol last night. He told me to call CEO Kim." There was a brief pause, a silence that seemed to last an eternity. "Ah, yes, Miss Lee. CEO Kim was expecting your call. One moment, please." Soo-jin's heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to burst from her chest. She was about to cross the line, to enter a world that was both a promise of salvation and an abyss of danger. The sound of the line being transferred was the sound of a door opening. She didn't know what awaited her on the other side, but she knew there was no turning back. Her war was just beginning, and she was about to face her new commander. The voice on the other end of the line, polished and distant, was like a portal. "CEO Kim Do-hyun's office. How may I help you?" Soo-jin stammered her name, her throat dry, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Ah, yes, Miss Lee. CEO Kim was expecting your call." The pause that followed seemed an eternity. A silent abyss between her world of neon and wax and the empire Kim Do-hyun commanded. Then, the sound of the line being transferred, a dry click, and Soo-jin's world would never be the same. The voice that answered was deep, calm, yet imbued with unquestionable authority. There was no warmth, no haste, just a cold efficiency that made Soo-jin flinch even miles away. "Lee Soo-jin, you called." It wasn't a question, but an affirmation, an acknowledgement that she had accepted the invitation to his game. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply, her voice almost a whisper. I called." There was a brief silence, filled only by the sound of her own accelerated breathing. "Good. Cheol will contact you to schedule a meeting. Be ready tomorrow morning. Punctuality is essential." And with that, the call ended. No further ado, no questions, no room for doubt, just an order. Soo-jin lowered the phone, her hand still trembling. This was it. She had crossed the line. The bridge to the abyss, or to salvation, was now beneath her feet. The morning sun, once a gentle reminder of a new day, now seemed like a spotlight exposing her audacious decision. The promise of 10 million won danced in her mind, a siren song pulling her into unknown waters. Her mother, her brother. They were the lighthouse guiding her, the strength propelling her forward, despite the fear that gnawed at her. Chael called an hour later, his voice as calm and controlled as the night before. "Miss Lee, CEO Kim expects you at 9 in the morning at his office. The address has been sent to your phone. Please dress appropriately. It's a corporate environment." The word appropriately echoed in Soo-jin's mind. What was appropriate for a car washer who owned only a pair of worn jeans and a few faded t-shirts? She didn't own a suit or an elegant dress. Her wardrobe was a testament to her life of hard work and sacrifice. She rummaged through her few clothes, despair growing. She found a simple, neutral-colored blouse and a dark skirt she wore for more formal occasions, a distant relative's funeral, a rare doctor's visit. It wasn't what she imagined for a meeting with a billionaire CEO, but it was the best she had. She washed and ironed the clothes with almost reverent care, as if the act could infuse them with the dignity she felt was lacking. The night was torture. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ji-yeon's mocking face, Kim Do-hyun's penetrating gaze, the cold gleam of the business card. She mentally rehearsed answers to questions she didn't know. What did he want from her? Why did he choose her? Insecurity was a slow poison, but the image of her mother, frail in bed, was the antidote. She couldn't fail. She wouldn't fail. The next morning, Soo-jin woke before dawn, her stomach churning. She got ready in silence, trying not to wake her family. A last look in the mirror revealed a young woman with tired eyes, but a fierce determination etched on her face. She looked like a soldier going to battle, dressed in her simplest uniform. The bus and subway ride to the city center was a journey to another world. The bustling streets, the towering skyscrapers that scraped the sky, the luxury cars whizzing by. Everything was a stark reminder of the distance between her life and Kim Do-hyun's. She felt small, insignificant, a speck of dust about to be swept away by a gale. The Kim Corporation building was a tower of glass and steel, so tall its tip seemed to disappear into the clouds. The entrance was a spectacle of polished marble and gleaming chrome. Women and men in impeccable suits hurried past, their footsteps echoing in the vast lobby. Soo-jin felt curious glances on her simple clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. Humiliation was an old friend. She wouldn't let it bring her down now. At the reception, a woman with a perfect smile and an elegant uniform greeted her. "Miss Lee Soo-jin? CEO Kim is expecting you on the 30th floor." The number 30 seemed unattainable. The elevator, silent and swift, carried her upwards, her stomach sinking with each floor. The doors opened to an equally luxurious corridor where natural light flooded the space through floor-to-ceiling windows. An assistant led her to a waiting room, offering her coffee or water. Soo-jin refused, her throat too tight to swallow anything. She sat in a soft leather armchair, observing the city view that stretched below. It was a view she never imagined seeing, a panorama of power and wealth that seemed as distant as the moon. Time dragged on. Each minute was an eternity, each sound a drumbeat in her head. She wondered what Kim Do-hyun was doing, if he was truly interested in her, or if this was just another whim of a powerful man. The tension was almost unbearable. Then the door opened. Chael appeared, his face expressionless. "CEO Kim is waiting for you, Miss Lee." Soo-jin stood up, her legs a little shaky. It was time. The war was about to begin, and she was about to face her commander. Kim Do-hyun's office was even more imposing than she had imagined, a sanctuary of power and control. And there, seated behind a massive ebony desk with the entire city at his feet, was he, Kim Do-hyun, his eyes as cold and calculating as the night before, fixed on her. The game had begun. The air in Kim Do-hyun's office was dense, heavy with the scent of power and a subtle fragrance of something expensive and indefinable. The entire city, a shimmering mosaic of concrete and light, stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, as if it were a carpet beneath his feet. But Soo-jin couldn't see the beauty. She saw only the vertigo, the abyss between her world and this one. Kim Do-hyun was there, a dark silhouette against the morning glow, seated behind a desk that seemed large enough to house its own galaxy. His eyes, a dark and unfathomable shade, were the same ones that had observed her from that luxury car, the same ones that had assessed her humiliation with cold curiosity. He didn't invite her to sit. He merely watched her, a prolonged silence that stretched like an invisible web, trapping her in the center of his attention. Each beat of Soo-jin's heart echoed in her ears, a frantic drum that threatened to explode. She felt cold sweat trickle down her back, her throat dry, the scent of her own nervousness. Lee Soo-jin! His voice broke the silence, deep and controlled, without a hint of emotion. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed, to having every word weighed and measured. "You called. That means you are willing to accept my offer." It wasn't a question, but a declaration, a verbal trap. If she said yes, she would be admitting her submission. If she said no, she would be throwing away the only hope she had. She clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palm. Her mother's pale, fragile image floated in her mind, the debt, the ticking clock. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply, her voice a little firmer than she expected. "I am willing to accept the offer." A slight movement of his lips, almost imperceptible, which could have been a smile or just a nervous twitch. He gestured to the chair in front of the desk, a silent invitation to sit. Soo-jin obeyed, feeling the soft leather beneath her hands. The chair seemed to swallow her, diminishing her even further in that grandiose setting. "Good," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you know why you are here, Soo-jin?" She hesitated. The obvious answer was because of the money, but she knew he expected more. He wanted a justification that validated his choice, that confirmed his perception of her. "I believe you saw something in me," she began, her voice still a little shaky, but gaining confidence with each word. Resilience, dedication, the ability to do whatever it takes, no matter the difficulty. She thought of the hot coffee, the humiliation, the pain in her hands from so much scrubbing. "I don't give up easily, sir, especially when something important is at stake." An almost imperceptible gleam passed through his eyes, a recognition. "And what is important to you, Soo-jin?" The question was a test, a probe into her soul. She couldn't lie, but she also couldn't expose herself completely. "My family, sir. My mother, my brother." Her voice faltered slightly as she mentioned her mother. "They are all I have. I would do anything to protect them, to ensure they have a better life." Kim Do-hyun leaned back in his chair, his fingers intertwined on the desk. His pose was that of a predator observing its prey, evaluating every movement, every breath. "I see. The dedication I witnessed then is driven by a deep need. That is good. Need breeds loyalty, and loyalty is what I seek." His words were an icy dagger. He didn't see her pain, her struggle, but merely a tool, a resource to be exploited. The humiliation she had felt at the car wash returned, but this time she swallowed it. There was no room for wounded pride here. "You will be my personal assistant," he declared, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "But do not expect common administrative tasks. You will not file reports or answer phone calls. Your role will be more intimate. You will be available anytime, anywhere. You will be my eyes and ears, my shadow. Discreet, efficient, and absolutely loyal. Your personal life will become secondary to my interests." "Understood." The description was vague, but the implication was clear. He wanted total control. She would be an extension of him, a living tool. Fear tightened her stomach, but the image of her mother's pain-free smile was a shield. "Understood, sir," she replied, her voice now firm without hesitation. "The salary will be 10,000,001 a month," he continued, mentioning the figure that seemed a distant dream. "With performance bonuses and total discretion, your housing and transportation costs will be covered, and your mother's immediate debt will be settled as soon as the contract is signed. However, there is a strict confidentiality clause. Any violation, no matter how minor, will result in immediate termination and severe penalties. You will lose everything, and I guarantee you will find no work anywhere else. 10,000,001, the debt settled, salvation. But the price was her freedom, her identity. She would be a gilded prisoner, a shadow without a life of her own. You will have a 3-month trial period," he concluded, his eyes fixed on hers. "If you fail, or if I decide you are not suitable, the agreement will be terminated. No questions asked, no appeals. Are you willing to accept these terms, Sujin? Are you willing to surrender to this life, without guarantees, without return, solely for the promise of a future for your family?" Silence returned, heavier than before. The city outside seemed to scream, but inside that office only the sound of her own breath was audible. It was the most important decision of her life, a leap in the dark, a pact with the devil. But what else did she have to lose? Her dignity had already been crushed. Her hope was the only thing left, and Kim Do-hyun was offering it back, wrapped in a dangerous package. She lifted her chin, looking him in the eyes, the determination on her face a mask for the terror she felt. "Yes, Mr. Kim, I accept." A slight nod. There was no triumph on his face, just a cold confirmation. "Very well. Cheol will arrange the documents. You start tomorrow. Be ready for anything." The war had begun, and Soo-jin, the car washer, had just enlisted in Kim Do-hyun's army, not knowing if she would be a hero or just another victim in his empire. The "yes" escaped my lips like a forced sigh, an inevitable surrender. There was no triumph on Kim Do-hyun's face, just the cold confirmation that he had gotten what he wanted. I was his now, a piece on his board, a sharp tool ready to be used. The war had begun, and I, the car washer, had just enlisted in the army of a man who saw people as resources, not as human beings. Cheol, the silent and expressionless man, appeared almost instantly. He led me to an adjacent room, where a lawyer with thin glasses and a serious demeanor was already waiting with a stack of documents. The contract was thick, full of legal jargon I barely understood, but the main clauses were etched into my mind. Absolute confidentiality, total availability, unquestionable loyalty. And the price of failure, the loss of everything, total ruin. It was a pact with the devil, sealed with ink, and the promise of a better life for my mother. My hands trembled slightly as I signed, each signature a nail in my own freedom. The lawyer explained the terms in a monotone voice, as if reading a shopping list, but each word was a hammer striking my soul. 10,000,001 a month, debt settled, housing and transportation covered. In return, I would be a shadow, an extension of Kim Do-hyun, without a life of my own, without an identity. The irony was cruel. I was selling my soul to save my mother's. When I left the Kim Corporation building, the sun was already high, and the city buzzed with the energy of a workday. But for me, the world seemed to have changed color. The streets that once seemed impassable were now just the way back to a life I was about to abandon. The air felt lighter, the weight of the debt momentarily suspended, but a new burden, invisible and heavier, was already on my shoulders. The journey back home was a blur. Each step took me further from the cold luxury of Do-hyun's office and back to the raw reality of my small apartment. The smell of cheap food, the sound of the neighbor's television, the dampness on the walls. Everything seemed to scream the distance between the two worlds. I had signed a contract that would take me out of there, but the change wasn't just physical. It was a transformation of my very essence. My mother was sleeping when I arrived, her face pale and fragile on the pillow. The sight of her was my fuel, the constant reminder of why I had made that impossible choice. How would I explain it to her? "Mom, I got a job that will pay for everything, but I can't tell you what I do or where, and my life won't be my own anymore." The truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. I would have to invent a story, a facade for my new gilded cage. I spent the afternoon in a stupor, tidying my few possessions. What would I take to this new life? My simple clothes didn't fit into Kim Do-hyun's world. I didn't know where I would live or what my daily life would be like. "Be ready for anything," he had said. The phrase echoed in my head, a somber premonition. Would I be a spy, a bodyguard, a mere tool for his darkest whims? The lack of clarity was terrifying. The phone rang late in the afternoon. It was Cheol. His voice was as expressionless as his face. "Miss Lee, your temporary apartment has been arranged. The driver will pick you up at 6 in the morning. A suitcase with appropriate corporate attire will be waiting for you. Your tasks will be communicated personally by CEO Kim." He hung up before I could ask any questions. Temporary apartment, appropriate clothes, 6 in the morning. The machine was already in motion, swallowing me. I had no time to grieve, to doubt, only to obey. The tension was a taut rope in my chest, but beneath it, a small flame of hope flickered. My mother would be safe. She would get the treatment. I looked at my reflection in the foggy mirror. My eyes were tired, but there was a new hardness in them, a determination forged in adversity. The car washer was dead. In her place, Kim Do-hyun's personal assistant was born, a woman who had exchanged her freedom for an uncertain but necessary future. Night fell, and with it, the last piece of my old life. Tomorrow, the shadow would begin to dance. The alarm clock blared at 5 in the morning, a jarring sound that seemed to tear the veil of my last night of freedom. It wasn't an ordinary awakening. There was no familiar rush to get ready for the car wash, nor the smell of cheap coffee. There was only a heavy silence, filled with the anxiety of the unknown. I looked at the cracked ceiling of my room, at the peeling walls that had witnessed so many of my fears and hopes. It was my last goodbye to a life that, however difficult, was mine. My mother slept deeply in the next room, the soft sound of her breathing a bittersweet melody. I couldn't wake her, couldn't explain. How would I tell her I was trading my essence for a future she deserved, but which I couldn't describe? "I'm going to a new job, Mom, a very good one." The words felt hollow, a lie that suffocated me before it was even spoken. I left a simple note, promising to call, promising that everything would be all right. It was the first of many lies I would have to tell. Cheol was there, punctual as a shadow, at 6 o'clock sharp. The sleek black car was a stark contrast to the dark, damp street of my neighborhood. He didn't say a word, just opened the back door with a cold, impersonal gesture. I got in, smelling new leather and power, and watched my old world shrink in the rearview mirror. There were no tears, just a sense of numbness. I was saying goodbye to the Soo-jin who washed cars, to the Soo-jin who dreamed of a simple life. The temporary apartment was everything I expected and nothing I wanted. Modern, minimalist, with a stunning city view I barely had time to appreciate. It was impersonal, soulless, a perfect backdrop for an existence without identity. On the bed there was an elegant leather suitcase. Inside, clothes that would never be mine. Tailored suits, silk blouses, high heels I barely knew how to wear. It was the uniform of my new life, an armor I would have to don to become the shadow Kim Do-hyun expected. I took a quick shower, feeling the warm water wash away not just the dirt, but also the remnants of my old persona. I put on one of the suits, a discreet grey, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was different. The eyes were still mine, but there was a hardness in them, a resignation that had never been there before. I was an imposter, an actress about to step onto the stage of a dangerous play. Cheol drove me to the Kim Corporation. The building was a monolith of glass and steel that scraped the sky, a symbol of its CEO's power and ambition. The lobby was a spectacle of polished marble and shimmering lights, where people in impeccable attire moved with an almost robotic efficiency. I felt small, insignificant, but at the same time, a strange and intrusive part of that world. I was led directly to the executive floor, a sanctuary of silence and luxury. The door to Kim Do-hyun's office was ajar. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pound in my chest. The yes I had uttered the day before now felt like a condemnation. He stood, his back to the window, observing the city below as if it were his own kingdom. He didn't turn immediately, allowing the silence to stretch, testing my patience, my submission. When he finally did, his eyes pierced mine, evaluating every detail of my new look, my posture. There was no approval, just a cold, calculating analysis. "Good morning, Soo-jin." His voice was as sharp and precise as the day before. "I hope you slept well. Your life as a personal assistant begins now." He gestured to the chair in front of his desk, but did not sit. He preferred to dominate, even while standing. "Thank you, sir," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "Your first task will not be in an office," he declared, ignoring my reply. "You will accompany me to an event tonight, a business dinner with foreign investors. Your role will be to observe. Do not speak unless directly questioned. Do not interact unless I order it. You will be my eyes and ears, an extension of my perception. I want you to observe everyone's body language, the whispers, the most subtle interactions, everything, and afterwards you will give me a detailed report." He paused, his eyes fixed on mine. "You are not there to socialize, Soo-jin. You are there to gather information, to see what others do not see, to anticipate. Understood?" The description was vague, but the implication was clear. I wouldn't be a secretary, but a spy, a silent observer in his power game. Fear tightened my stomach, but the image of my mother's pain-free smile was a shield. "Understood, sir," I said, my voice now an echo of the determination I had forged. "Very well. Cheol will provide you with the event details and a secure communicator. Be ready by 7 tonight. And remember, Soo-jin, discretion is key. Your existence must be almost invisible. You are a shadow, and shadows make no noise." He turned back to the window, ending the conversation. I was a shadow, yes, but a shadow with a purpose, with a burning flame of hope in her heart. The war had begun, and I was about to enter Kim Do-hyun's battlefield. The door to Kim Do-hyun's office closed behind me with a soft click, but the sound echoed in my mind like a prison gate locking. I was free to leave, but freedom was an illusion. I was now a piece on his board, a shadow without a voice, without a name, other than what he assigned me. The description spy wasn't just a metaphor, it was my new reality. The day dragged on in a surreal stupor. Cheol handed me an encrypted tablet and a small, almost invisible earpiece, briefly explaining how they worked. "For direct communication with CEO Kim and to record your observations," he said, his voice as monotonous as ever. There was no room for questions, only for acceptance. The tablet contained a summary profile of the main investors who would be present at the dinner. Powerful names, serious faces, incalculable fortunes. I would have to memorize each one, their affiliations, their success stories, and most importantly, their potential weaknesses. In the impersonal apartment, I tried to familiarize myself with the clothes that now made up my wardrobe. Each piece was of luxurious fabric, an impeccable cut, but none of them seemed to belong to me. I felt like a child playing dress-up. The mirror returned the image of an elegant woman, but the eyes behind the light makeup were still mine, laden with a mixture of fear and a stubborn spark of defiance. I was transforming, yes, but I didn't know if it was for the better or if I was losing myself in the process. With each passing hour, my mother's image became more vivid in my mind. Her faint smile, the way she held my hand, it was for her that I was doing this, for her that I would wear this armor, that I would become a shadow, that I would submit to the whims of a man who saw people as tools. The promise of her health was my only solace, the only anchor in a sea of uncertainties. When Cheol picked me up at 7 that evening, I was already ready, wearing a simple but elegant black dress that made me feel more invisible than ever. My hair was pulled back in a low bun, my makeup discreet. I was the perfect blank canvas for Kim Do-hyun's projections. The car glided through the illuminated city, and each skyscraper seemed a reminder of the abyss between my past and my present. The dinner venue was an event hall in one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels, a sanctuary of luxury and power. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a golden glow over tables set with fine porcelain and silver cutlery. The air was heavy with the smell of expensive food and imported perfumes. Men in impeccable suits and women in designer dresses mingled, their low voices and restrained laughter filling the atmosphere with a symphony of privilege. Kim Do-hyun was already there, an imposing figure who seemed to absorb all the light around him. He stood at the center of a small group of men, his posture erect, his gaze penetrating. When he saw me, only an almost imperceptible nod. I was an extension, a part of the scenery, and that was how it should be. My task began immediately. I moved along the periphery of the hall, a silent observer. My eyes trained to catch every detail. The earpiece was a constant link to Cheol's voice, who occasionally gave me discreet instructions. "Mr. Park, to your left, is restless. Observe his gestures." Mrs. Lee, near the window, just received a message. Try to see her reaction. I became an observation machine. I noticed the prolonged handshake between two men who claimed to be rivals, a woman's furtive glance at her watch, indicating impatience or a secret engagement, the muffled whispers that ended in forced laughter. The way Kim Do-hyun maintained his unshakable composure even when faced with difficult questions, his eyes never revealing more than he wanted. There was a moment when I felt exposed. As I passed near a table, a middle-aged woman, with a diamond necklace that seemed to weigh a ton, looked me up and down with almost palpable disdain. Her eyes lingered on my simple dress, in contrast to the opulence around. I felt heat rise to my face, the old Soo-jin wanting to shrink, but the new Soo-jin merely held the gaze for a second before looking away like a shadow that does not linger. I was there to see, not to be seen, to listen, not to speak. It was a game of camouflage, and I was learning the rules quickly. The tension was a constant, a low hum in my ears, but with each successful observation, with each detail I mentally recorded for my report, a strange sense of competence began to blossom. I wasn't a car washer nor a secretary. I was Kim Do-hyun's eyes, and my eyes were open. The dinner unfolded in a whirlwind of strategic conversations and fake smiles. I saw politics, ambition, and greed dance beneath the crystal chandeliers. I saw how power manifested in subtle gestures, in unspoken words, in exchanged glances. And I saw Kim Do-hyun, the maestro of this orchestra of power, conducting each note with terrifying precision. When the event finally came to an end, and the guests began to disperse, I felt a deep weariness, but also a strange mental exhaustion. My mind was full of faces, voices, and gestures. I had absorbed everything like a sponge. Cheol was waiting for me at the exit, the car already warm. Kim Do-hyun caught up with me, his eyes meeting mine for a brief instant. "Your report, Soo-jin," he said, his voice low but laden with expectation. "I want it on my desk by 8 in the morning. Detailed, precise, and don't forget anything." I nodded, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The war hadn't ended with dinner. It was just beginning, and now the battle of the mind was about to be waged. I was a shadow, yes, but a shadow that had seen too much to be ignored. Cheol's car dropped me off at the impersonal apartment, but now it felt like a refuge. The silence was a blessing, but also a reminder of the task awaiting me. The clock on the wall read almost 1 in the morning. I had less than 7 hours to transform a whirlwind of observations into a cohesive and useful report. The adrenaline from dinner had dissipated, replaced by an exhaustion that weighed in my bones. I sat at the table, the encrypted tablet before me. The screen glowed, inviting me to dive back into that world of shadows and secrets. My hands trembled slightly as I typed the first word. Where to begin? Kim Do-hyun had asked for detailed and precise. He didn't want a list of events, but an analysis, an interpretation of what lay beneath the polished surface. I closed my eyes, reliving each scene. Mr. Park's handshake, which lasted a second longer than necessary as his eyes swept the hall, searching for something or someone. Mrs. Lee, whose forced smile didn't reach her eyes when she spoke of her company's recent acquisition. The way Mr. Choi, a notoriously cautious investor, leaned slightly forward upon hearing a competitor's name, an almost imperceptible gesture of interest. I typed, my fingers flying over the keyboard, transforming visual and auditory memories into text. I described the body language, the micro-gestures, the pauses in conversations, the tone of voice. I analyzed the interactions, looking for patterns, contradictions. The earpiece, still in my ear, seemed to whisper Cheol's instructions, reinforcing the need for precision. I wasn't just reporting, I was deciphering. With each line written, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and revulsion. Satisfaction for completing the task, for discovering an analytical capacity I never knew I possessed. Revulsion for being immersed in a world of manipulation where every smile could hide a knife, every word a trap. My mind, once focused on coffee stains and car wax, was now trained to detect fissures in the human facade. The hours dragged on. The strong coffee I made wasn't enough to ward off the sleep that threatened to consume me. My mother, her image, fragile yet with a hopeful smile, was my anchor. Every word typed was a step towards her recovery. I couldn't fail. I couldn't afford to be less than perfect. When the sun began to peek through the window, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and orange, I typed the last sentence. I reviewed the report, looking for any flaw, any ambiguity. It was a 15-page document, dense in detail, rich in inferences. I had delivered not only what Kim Do-hyun asked for, but perhaps even more. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but there was a strange energy pulsing in my veins. A feeling of having faced a challenge and perhaps overcome it. I took a quick shower, put on one of the simple suits Cheol had provided, and tied my hair back. I needed to look as impeccable as the report I was about to deliver. At 7:45 a.m., I stood in front of Kim Do-hyun's office door. My heart pounded, a drumbeat in my ears. The door was closed today. I took a deep breath and knocked. Enter. His voice was as cold and controlled as I remembered. He was sitting at his desk, his eyes fixed on his computer screen. He didn't look up when I entered. "The report, Soo-jin?" he asked, without looking away. "Yes, sir." "It's on the tablet," I said, extending the device. He took it without looking at me, his long, elegant fingers typing quickly to open it. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive as he read. His eyes scanned the pages, the expression on his face inscrutable. I felt like a student waiting for the grade of a crucial exam. Each minute seemed an eternity. I observed every micro-expression, every movement of his eyes, trying to decipher what he was thinking, but he was a master at hiding his emotions. "Lie," he finished. He closed the tablet with a soft click and placed it on the desk. His eyes, an icy blue, met mine. There was no smile, no nod of approval, just that cold, penetrating analysis. "Interesting," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You noticed more than I expected. Your observations about Mr. Park and Mrs. Lee are particularly insightful." A small, almost imperceptible relief coursed through my body. I had passed the first test. "However," he continued, and my stomach tightened again, "you focused too much on the obvious details. What did you not see, Soo-jin? What was missing? What wasn't said?" He challenged me not with anger, but with relentless expectation. He wanted me to look beyond the visible, beyond the obvious. He wanted a shadow that could see the darkness. "Your next task," he declared, standing and walking to the window, "will be more complex. You will not just be my eyes and ears. You will be my voice. You will infiltrate one of Mrs. Lee's social circles. I want you to discover the true reason behind her recent acquisition. There is more at stake than the official reports indicate." My heart pounded. Infiltrate? Speak? This was a gigantic leap from invisible shadow to undercover agent. Fear tightened my throat. "But, sir, I have no experience socializing in those circles," I stammered, my voice a little weaker than I would have liked. He turned, his eyes fixed on mine. "That's why you're here, Soo-jin, to learn, to adapt. Cheol will give you the details and the necessary tools. You will have a new identity, a new story, and above all, you will have to be convincing. Remember, Soo-jin, a shadow can blend into darkness, but a good shadow can also become the light when needed. And now, you need to shine." He gestured to the door, ending the conversation. I left, the report still fresh on his desk, but my mind was already on a new battlefield. No longer a silent observer, but an actress, an imposter. Kim Do-hyun's war was becoming my war, and I was about to enter even more dangerous territory. The flame of hope in my heart still burned, but now it was surrounded by a dense fog of uncertainty and danger. I left Kim Do-hyun's office, but my body seemed to have stayed behind, frozen at the door. His words echoed in my mind, each one a hammer striking against my newfound confidence. "You will be my voice. You will infiltrate." The air felt denser, each breath an effort. I wasn't an actress. I wasn't a socialite. I was Soo-jin, the girl who washed cars, the shadow who observed. How could I become the light he asked for without burning myself? Fear was a tight knot in my stomach, but behind it, a cold, familiar determination began to solidify. My mother. She was the reason for everything, the anchor that kept me from crumbling. Cheol was waiting for me in the corridor, his eyes expressionless, yet with a hint of understanding I couldn't decipher. He led me to a smaller meeting room, where a laptop and some documents were already laid out on the glass table. The environment was sterile, but the task awaiting me was far from aseptic. "Mrs. Lee is the key," he began, without preamble, his voice as calm as ever. "Her acquisition of Aurora Tech was too fast, too clean. There are rumors of hidden financing, a partnership she is trying to keep secret. Our goal is to find out who is behind it and why." He slid a folder towards me. "Your name will be Lee Ji-eun, a young heiress from a minor family fortune, recently returned from a period of study abroad, an enthusiast of art and philanthropy, a perfect profile to blend into Mrs. Lee's circle." My heart pounded erratically. Lee Ji-eun. It was like putting on a skin that didn't belong to me, an identity forged for a purpose that seemed increasingly dangerous. I looked at the photo in the document, a woman with a confident smile, bright eyes and impeccable posture. It was me, but it wasn't. A polished, unattainable version of who I was supposed to become. The days that followed were a blur of intense learning. Cheol wasn't just a driver, he was a strategist, a relentless mentor. He taught me how to walk, how to talk, how to smile in a way that revealed nothing yet seemed inviting. I studied Korean art history, memorized the names of prominent philanthropists, learned to distinguish an expensive wine by its aroma, and to use silver cutlery without making a sound. Every gesture, every word was rehearsed and repeated until it became second nature. I spent hours in front of the mirror in the impersonal apartment, practicing expressions, testing smiles, trying to find the Lee Ji-un within me. The wardrobe Cheol provided was of discreet yet impeccable luxury. Silks, cashmeres, minimal but tasteful jewelry. Each piece was an armor, a disguise. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger. The eyes were mine, the tiredness was mine. But the woman staring back at me was someone else, an imposter. The pressure was immense. Kim Do-hyun expected perfection. My mother expected my return. I was torn between these two worlds, and the bridge between them was my ability to lie, to deceive. Each night, after the exhausting training sessions, I sat alone in the apartment, my mind buzzing. It was wrong. All of it was a farce. I was becoming someone I despised, someone who lived on appearances and secrets. But then, my mother's image would surface. Her fragile smile, the hope in her eyes, the chemotherapy, the bills, the promise I made to myself that I would do anything to save her. This was my anchor, my justification. With each silk dress I wore, with each false story I memorized, I repeated to myself, "It's for Mom. It's for Mom." The line between Soo-jin and Lee Ji-un grew increasingly thin, and I feared losing it completely. I was transforming into a tool, a weapon in Kim Do-hyun's hands, and the only thing keeping me sane was my purpose. I remembered the spoiled heiress who threw coffee on my windshield, the woman with the diamond necklace who looked at me with disdain. Now I would be one of them, or at least I would pretend to be. The irony did not escape me. Lee Cheol informed me about the first event, a charity art auction organized by one of Mrs. Lee's associates. It would be my first appearance as Lee Ji-un. He handed me a small invitation card engraved on heavy paper with the name Lee Ji-un in elegant calligraphy. "Your entry is guaranteed. Your goal is simple: to be seen, to be noticed, to make superficial connections. Mrs. Lee will be there. Do not approach her directly, but ensure she knows who you are. She is shrewd. Any false step and you will be exposed." The night before the auction was the longest of my life. I went over every detail, every possible scenario. Fear was a knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a spark of something new began to glow. A strange excitement. I was no longer the shadow. I was the actress about to step on stage, and the stage was the dangerous, glittering world of Seoul's elite. Kim Do-hyun's war was no longer just his. It was my war, and I was about to fight on the front lines, armed only with a fake smile and a borrowed identity. The clock ticked forward, and with it, the inevitability of my new role. I was ready, or at least I had to be. The day of the auction dawned with a grey sky, mirroring the storm in my soul. Each beat of my heart felt like a war drum announcing the battle I was about to face. Cheol arrived punctually, his eyes assessing me with the same coldness as always. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was a constant reminder of the magnitude of the task. The apartment, which once felt like a refuge, was now a theater dressing room, where I prepared for the role of my life. The makeup was applied with surgical precision, transforming my tired face into an impeccable canvas. Each brushstroke erased a little of the Sujin I knew, replacing her with an image of sophistication and indifference. The navy blue silk dress, chosen by Cheol, glided over my skin like a second skin. It was elegant, discreet, yet exuded a silent luxury that screamed old money. The jewelry, a pair of pearl earrings and a solitaire ring, were minimalist, but of unmistakable brilliance. I looked at myself in the mirror. It wasn't me, it was Lee Ji-eun. The eyes, still mine, carried a different gleam, a mixture of nervousness and forced determination. I practiced the smile, the nod, the erect posture Cheol had insisted upon. "Remember, Ji-eun," he had said, "every movement is a statement. You are the embodiment of grace and confidence, even if inside you're panicking." And I was panicking. My stomach was a nest of butterflies, each one flapping its wings with the force of a hurricane. The drive to the auction venue was in silence. The luxury car glided through the streets of Seoul, and I watched the city pass by, feeling increasingly distant from it, increasingly distant from myself. I reviewed the names, the stories, the details of my false biography. Lee Ji-eun, heiress of a minor fortune, recently returned from abroad, passionate about art. I had to be her, not just seem like her. My mother's image, fragile but smiling, was the only thing that kept me focused, the only anchor amidst this storm of lies. When the car stopped, the door was opened by an impeccable valet. The flashlights, even if not for me, blinded me for an instant. The murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, the scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers hit me like a wave. It was a world of glitter and superficiality, exactly as I imagined. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped out of the car. Lee Ji-eun was making her entrance. The hall was grand, adorned with artworks worth more than I would ever see in a lifetime. Men in tailored suits and women in haute couture dresses circulated, their voices low and confident. I moved through the hall, a polite smile fixed on my lips, my eyes scanning the crowd, looking for her. Mrs. Lee. I approached a group discussing an abstract sculpture, feigning interest. "It's fascinating how the artist plays with light and shadow, isn't it?" I said, my voice a little louder than usual, but still soft. A grey-haired man turned, his eyes assessing me. "Yes, indeed," he replied. "You are." "Lee Ji-eun," I said, extending my hand with the firmness Cheol had taught me. "I've just returned from Paris. I'm enchanted by Seoul's art scene." The conversation flowed, superficial and full of clichés, but I was playing my part. I was the new face, the curiosity of the night. I moved from group to group, planting seeds, weaving my web. Each fake laugh, each rehearsed comment was a step deeper into the abyss of my new identity. I found myself observing the other women, their gestures, their laughs, trying to absorb every detail, every nuance of their world. It was an exhausting performance, a social chess game where every move was calculated. Then I saw her, Mrs. Lee. She was in a corner surrounded by a small entourage, laughing at something a man in glasses was saying. She exuded power, even in such a polished environment. Her eyes, which I remembered as astute, swept the room, and for a brief moment, met mine. There was no recognition, just a quick, almost imperceptible assessment before she looked away. But I knew she had noticed me, the new face, the new curiosity. I continued to circulate, keeping her in my field of vision, but without seeming obvious. I needed the information about Lee Ji-eun to reach her organically, like a rumor, an innocent piece of gossip. My ears were attentive to every murmur, every name mentioned. I strategically positioned myself near her group, engaging in a conversation about a recent exhibition by a Korean artist in London, a detail Cheol had instructed me to use. Mrs. Lee, I noticed, cast a discreet glance in my direction, a spark of interest in her eyes. The night wore on, and weariness began to set in. but adrenaline kept me alert. I had done what Kiel asked. I had been seen, I had been noticed, and Mrs. Lee, I was sure, knew who Lee Ji-eun was. Leaving the auction, the cold night air was a welcome relief. I got into the car, exhausted, but with a strange sense of accomplishment. I had survived. I had performed. But the Soo-jin who entered that hall was not the same one who left. The line between truth and lies, between me and Lee Ji-eun, was more blurred than ever. Kim Do-hyun's war was just beginning, and I was now an active piece on the board, a piece that barely recognized herself anymore. I was ready for the next step, but with each step I wondered how much of Soo-jin would remain in the end. The silence in the car, on the way back to the luxury apartment that was now my disguise, was no longer a refuge. It was a wait, an echo chamber for the fake laughs and rehearsed greetings of the night. Every fiber of my being ached, not from physical exhaustion, but from the relentless mental gymnastics Lee Ji-eun's performance demanded. The city lights, once a distant blur, now seemed to flicker at a frantic pace, each one a reminder of the world I had left behind, the world I was fighting to save. My reflection in the dark car window was that of a stranger, the impeccable makeup, the elegant dress, the faint smile that still lingered on my lips. So alien to me. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to find the original Soo-jin, the girl who scrubbed windshields under the harsh glare of streetlights. She seemed distant, almost a faded memory. Cheol was waiting for me in the apartment, his slender, austere silhouette framed by the faint light of the room. He offered no praise, just an almost imperceptible nod. "Report," he demanded, his penetrating eyes fixed on mine, as if he could see through my soul and all my lies. I narrated each interaction, each exchanged glance, each carefully chosen word. He listened, impassive, occasionally jotting something down in a small notepad. When I finished, his verdict was concise, almost cold. "Mrs. Lee noticed you. It's a good start." A good start. Not a triumph, not a victory. Just the first step on a steep and dangerous ladder. The bar, I knew, was impossibly high. "CEO Kim is satisfied with your discretion and your ability to adapt," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "He wants you to prepare for the next step. Mrs. Lee has a charity event next week, a private dinner for a more intimate circle. You will be invited." My heart leapt, a war drum inside my chest. Invited, directly into the lioness's den, to be examined under an even crueler light. Tension tightened my stomach. The days that followed were a whirlwind of information, a deeper dive into the abyss of Mrs. Lee's world. Kiol inundated me with details, her eccentric tastes, her meticulous habits, the complex web of her allies, and the enemies she kept close. I devoured profiles of potential guests, memorizing family trees that stretched back generations, old scandals that still echoed in the corridors of power, and the latest investments that shaped her empire. Every detail was a crucial piece of the puzzle, and I was the piece that needed to fit perfectly, leaving no trace of a seam. Lee Ji-eun's wardrobe grew, each piece more stunning than the last, but each also another layer of disguise, a heavier burden on my shoulders. I felt like a porcelain doll, carefully dressed and programmed for a purpose that wasn't mine. Each night the solitude of the apartment swallowed me, an oppressive silence. I called my mother, inventing stories about a new job that kept me busy late, about her improvement. Her voice, though weak and permeated by the fatigue of chemotherapy, was the only real sound in my life, the only thing that connected me to the Soo-jin I used to be. "The chemo is working, dear," she would whisper, and that fragile hope was my strength. But the bills continued to pile up, a constant and cruel reminder of why I was doing all this. "It's for Mom." This phrase became my mantra, my anchor. The only thing that kept me from crumbling under the overwhelming weight of the lie, but the line between me and Lee Ji-eun was growing thinner and thinner. I found myself thinking like her, reacting like her. The imposter was becoming real, and the original Soo-jin was disappearing, like a shadow at dawn. The day of the dinner arrived, and this time, nervousness was replaced by a cold and calculated determination. I wasn't Soo-jin, I was Lee Ji-eun. I looked at myself in the mirror, and the woman staring back at me was confident, elegant, with a gleam in her eyes that wasn't fear, but a carefully veiled shrewdness. The dress, a deep emerald green, enhanced the color of my eyes, a choice by Cheol to leave a memorable but not ostentatious impression. The diamond necklace he handed me to wear was simple, but its sparkle betrayed an incalculable value. I remembered the spoiled heiress, her diamond necklace, and a bitter irony struck me. Now I wore one, and it wasn't mine. It was a tool, another piece of my disguise. The dinner was at a private mansion, a labyrinth of discreet opulence, where every object seemed to whisper centuries-old stories. Mrs. Lee greeted me with a polished smile, her astute eyes assessing me closely, like a predator examining its prey. "Miss Lee Ji-eun, it's a pleasure to have you with us," she said, her voice soft, yet with an undeniable authority that filled the space. "I've heard wonderful things about your return to Seoul." I smiled. The smile Cheol had perfected, a perfect mask. "The pleasure is all mine, Mrs. Lee. Your reputation precedes you." The night was an intricate game of cat and mouse. I moved among the guests, weaving conversations, planting information, always aware of Mrs. Lee's presence. I felt her gaze on me, testing, probing every movement, every word. I spoke of art, of exotic travels, of audacious investments, all with the confidence of someone who truly belonged to that world. At one point, Mrs. Lee approached me, a glass of wine in hand, her eyes fixed on mine. "You have a keen eye for business, Miss Lee," she commented, her voice laden with calculated curiosity. "Your father was known for it." She was testing me, mentioning my fake father, poking at the wound of my forged identity. "I learned from the best, Mrs. Lee," I replied, holding her gaze firmly, without wavering. "And I continue to learn." The conversation deepened. She asked me about my intentions in Seoul, about my future investments. I responded with the information Cheol had given me, details that seemed spontaneous, but were carefully planned to build Lee Ji-eun's persona. I could feel the tension in every word, every gesture. I was in the lion's mouth, and I needed to be perfect. Mrs. Lee seemed satisfied, or at least deeply intrigued. Then came the invitation, the gilded trap. "I'd like to invite you to an informal meeting at my office next week, Miss Lee, to discuss some collaboration opportunities." My heart froze, and at the same time, a wave of adrenaline surged through me. The next step, the deepest dive, I had succeeded. But at what cost? Mrs. Lee's invitation echoed in my ears like a warning bell, a sound that was both a melody of triumph and a death knell for the Soo-jin I was losing. I had succeeded, the bait had been swallowed, but at what cost? The question hung, heavy and unanswered, as I entered the waiting car. The driver, a silent and efficient man, seemed an extension of my new life, a shadow accompanying me at every step of this elaborate charade. In the apartment, Cheol was waiting for me, the living room light reflecting off his glasses, giving him an almost robotic aura. He didn't need to ask. My eyes probably already told the story. "She invited me to her office," I said, my voice firmer than I felt, "to discuss collaboration opportunities." A faint, almost imperceptible smile curved Cheol's lips. "Excellent. CEO Kim will be pleased." Satisfaction, such an empty word amidst so much tension. He didn't ask about my state, about the weight I carried, only about the success of the mission. "This is the most critical phase," Su Jin, he continued, his voice low but laden with a gravity that chilled me. You will be in the lioness's den without the distractions of a social event. Every word, every gesture will be analyzed. Mrs. Lee is not a woman who leaves loose ends. The days that followed were a calculated torture. Cheol plunged me into an ocean of information about Mrs. Lee's businesses, her most sensitive investments, the weak points of her empire, the secrets she guarded with tooth and nail. I devoured financial reports, memorized names of advisors, studied power flow diagrams. Every night I dreamed of charts and numbers, of Mrs. Lee's astute face watching me from every shadow. I felt like a spy in a suspense film, but without the glamour, only the constant fear of being discovered. With each call to my mother, guilt gnawed at me. I'm fine, Mom. The work is demanding, but I'm learning a lot, I lied, my voice forced to sound cheerful. She spoke of chemotherapy, of gradual improvement, and I clung to those words like a castaway to a piece of driftwood. It's for Mom, I repeated to myself, over and over, as the original Su Jin drowned beneath the layers of Lee Ji-un. The line was no longer thin, it had disappeared. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman with a keen gaze and a forged confidence, but who was not me. The day of the meeting arrived, and with it a strange calm. It wasn't resignation, but a cold acceptance of my fate. I was Lee Ji-un. I needed to be. The dress chosen by Cheol was an impeccable pantsuit, a deep navy blue, exuding professionalism and power. No flashy jewelry, just a discreet yet invaluable watch. The perfect armor. Mrs. Lee's office was a sanctuary of power. Dark wood walls, a panoramic city view that seemed to bow to her, and an imposing mahogany desk that resembled a battlefield. She sat behind it, a small, calculating smile on her lips. "Miss Lee, it's a pleasure to have you here," she said, her voice soft, yet with a tone that brooked no argument. "Please, have a seat." The conversation began with pleasantries, but quickly delved into business. She tested me, launching tricky questions about the market, about my opinions on recent investments, about my supposed family history. I responded with the precision of a robot, citing the data Cheol had given me, weaving Lee Ji-un's narrative with a fluidity that unnerved me. I could feel cold sweat trickling down my back, but my face remained impassive, my gaze steady. Then she leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. "Miss Lee, I have followed your return with great interest. Your father, a man of vision, would be proud. And I see you have inherited not only his shrewdness, but also a certain audacity." She paused, and silence filled the room, heavy as lead. "I'm about to launch a new project, a technology joint venture with an American company with the potential to revolutionize the Asian market. It is a high-risk investment, but with stratospheric returns. I need someone with your acumen and your network to lead the strategy team, someone who can navigate turbulent waters with confidence." My heart leaped. Lead a team? A high-risk project? This wasn't just collaboration. It was a position of power, responsibility, and unprecedented access. It was exactly what Kim Do-hyun wanted, but it was also an even deeper trap. "It's an intriguing proposal." "Mrs. Lee," I replied, my voice calm, but my mind in a whirl. "It's an honor to be considered for such an endeavor." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Think about it, Miss Lee. It's a unique opportunity, and I believe you are the right person for it." I knew I had no choice. Do-hyun had prepared me for this. This was the gateway to the heart of Mrs. Lee's empire. Accepting meant diving in headfirst, without a safety net. It meant that Lee Ji-un would become even more real, and Su Jin even more a distant memory. "I accept, Mrs. Lee," I said, my voice firm, the decision made. "I am ready for the challenge." Mrs. Lee's smile widened, revealing a satisfaction that chilled me to the bone. Excellent. We will begin next week. I'm sure we will do great things together, Miss Lee. Leaving that office, the world seemed to spin. I had accepted a role that would take me into the depths of a game I barely understood. Kim Do-hyun's war was intensifying, and I was now a general in his army, a central piece on his board. But with each step Lee Ji-yoon took towards power, Soo-jin drifted further away. A pale, almost forgotten shadow. I was in, but at what price to my soul? The cold night air could not dissipate the heat of the tension burning in my veins. I had accepted. The phrase echoed in my mind, a sentence uttered not by a judge but by myself, in an opulent office that now seemed the epicenter of a personal earthquake. As I entered the car, the driver, always present, always silent, seemed an extension of my new gilded prison. I was Lee Ji-eun, and Lee Ji-eun had just become the leader of a high-risk project for Mrs. Lee. Cheol was waiting for me in the apartment, his expression inscrutable, but his eyes, behind his glasses, gleamed with contained satisfaction. "Excellent, Soo-jin," he said, his voice calm, but with an intensity that made me shiver. "You exceeded expectations. Mrs. Lee has placed you exactly where we needed you." He didn't ask about the weight of the decision, about the knot in my stomach, about the Soo-jin who cowered, frightened, inside me. To him, I was a tool, a chess piece that had been successfully moved. CEO Kim is impressed. This project is the key to unraveling Mrs. Lee's most closely guarded secrets. It is the gateway to the heart of her empire. The following days were a whirlwind. Cheol plunged me into a universe of technical and strategic details about the joint venture. Names of American companies, technology terms I had never heard, financial projections that seemed written in a foreign language. I spent hours studying, memorizing, absorbing every piece of information like a sponge, while the pressure of not making a single mistake suffocated me. "You need to be the expert, Soo-jin," Cheol hammered. "The visionary Mrs. Lee believes she has found." My new team was a group of experienced professionals, all loyal to Mrs. Lee, all assessing me with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. I felt their glances, their veiled questions, testing my authority, my supposed acumen. I had to be impeccable, every word, every decision, a reflection of the Lee Ji-eun Cheol had created. I led meetings, presented strategies, negotiated with foreign partners via video conference, all with a confidence that was a carefully constructed facade. Inside, I was a tangle of nerves, but on the outside, Lee Ji-eun was the personification of competence. Each night, exhausted, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had more tired, but also sharper eyes. Her smile was more calculated, her posture more erect. The sparkle of Soo-jin, the girl who washed cars and dreamed of a simple life, was fading, replaced by the cold flame of Lee Ji-eun's forged ambition. The line separating the two had not just disappeared, it had been incinerated. Calls to my mother were a refuge, but also a source of guilt. "I'm so proud of you, my daughter," she would say, her voice weak but full of love. "Your work seems so important." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing a laugh, painting a picture of success and accomplishment that was a cruel lie. She spoke of chemotherapy, of the hope that the treatments were working. And I clung to that hope, to that promise of healing, as the only justification for the soul I was selling. Mrs. Lee watched everything closely. She would appear unexpectedly in meetings, her astute eyes scanning the room, fixing on me for long moments. She asked incisive questions, testing my knowledge, my leadership. I responded with the precision Cheol had trained me for, with the audacity Lee Ji-eun was supposed to possess. I could feel her game, the way she pushed me to the limits, looking for a crack in my armor. But I couldn't give in. I was the general in her army, and I needed to be ruthless. "Miss Lee," Your vision for expansion into the Vietnamese market is audacious, she commented one day, an enigmatic smile on her lips. But I appreciate audacity. It's a rare quality in our day. It was a compliment, but laden with a subtext that chilled me. She didn't trust me blindly. She was using me, testing me, molding me for her own ends. I was a valuable piece, but still a piece. The project advanced, and with it, the complexity of my life. I was navigating increasingly deeper waters, where every decision had real consequences, not just for Do Hyun's mission, but for my own safety. I was inside the lioness's den, not as a visitor, but as one of her cubs, learning to hunt and survive in her world. But with each step Lee Ji-un took towards power, Soo-jin drifted further away, a pale, almost forgotten shadow, trapped in a purgatory of lies and disguises. Kim Do-hyun's war was intensifying, and I was now a central piece, a sharp weapon in his hands. But at what price to my soul? The question was no longer a whisper, it was a silent scream that echoed in every fiber of my being as I sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of Lee Ji-un. I was building an empire for someone else, while my own self disintegrated. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, a blur of meetings, analyses, and high-stakes decisions. Lee Ji-un was now my unquestionable reality. I breathed technology terms, dreamed of financial projections, and woke with the urgency of a relentless agenda. The team, once skeptical, now followed me with a mixture of respect and admiration. I had proven to be the leader Mrs. Lee expected, the visionary Cheol had molded. Every step I took was calculated, every word weighed. Lee Ji-un's armor was so fused to my skin that I barely remembered what it was like to breathe without it. Mrs. Lee, always attentive, seemed satisfied, but her eyes never lost the gleam of a predator. She gave me more autonomy, more responsibility, pushing me to the center of her web. And it was there, in the heart of the web, that I found the crack. Cheol had instructed me to look for anomalies, for unusual clauses in secondary contracts, for cash flows that didn't fit perfectly. He gave me a map, but I had to find the treasure. The joint venture, so heralded as a cutting-edge partnership, was in fact a facade. Within a series of attached documents, hidden under layers of legal jargon and complex transactions, I discovered Mrs. Lee's true plan. She didn't just want to collaborate, she wanted to cannibalize. The goal was to drain the American company's intellectual property and patents, devalue it through obscure financial maneuvers, and then orchestrate a hostile takeover, leaving the American partners with nothing but debt and an emptied business. It was a scheme of gigantic proportions, a corporate coup that would destroy lives and fortunes. The air in my lungs seemed to thin. It wasn't just a power game, it was a crime, and I was at its center, an essential piece in Mrs. Lee's success. With each new discovery, with each decoded document, the weight of my participation became unbearable. I was helping to build the guillotine. The tension was palpable. I needed to act, but every move was monitored. Mrs. Lee had eyes and ears everywhere. I felt Cheol's pressure, as he called me discreetly, demanding updates, his voice calm, but with an urgency that chilled me. "You found it, didn't you, Soo-jin?" he would whisper, each time reminding me who I truly was. The opportunity came during a business trip to Seattle for a meeting with the American partners. Away from Mrs. Lee's watchful eyes, I managed a moment alone. With trembling hands but a focused mind, I used a secure laptop provided by Cheol. I sent the encrypted files, the irrefutable proof of Mrs. Lee's plan. Each click of the mouse was an irreversible step, a leap into the abyss. The information was out. The return to Seoul was a purgatory. I expected the storm, the revelation, the downfall. But the silence was deafening. Mrs. Lee continued with her routine, her calculated smiles, her incisive questions. She didn't know or pretended not to know. The weight gnawed at me. Then the news broke, not all at once but in waves. First, rumors in the press about irregularities in the joint venture, then more incisive articles citing anonymous sources and leaked documents. The American company announced an internal audit and suspended all operations with Mrs. Lee's company. The market reacted violently. Stocks plummeted. Mrs. Lee called an emergency meeting. Her face was pale, but her fury was contained, a cold flame in her eyes. She looked at us, one by one, searching for the traitor. When her eyes met mine for an instant, I saw a spark of suspicion, a cold recognition. But my face remained impassive. Lee Ji-eun would not betray. The downfall was swift and brutal. The media unearthed past scandals, investors withdrew their support, and authorities initiated a criminal investigation. Mrs. Lee's empire, built on decades of manipulation, began to crumble. She fought, of course, with the ferocity of a cornered tigress, but the evidence was overwhelming. I watched it all closely, a privileged spectator of my own act of sabotage. With each headline, with each news report about Mrs. Lee's disgrace, a part of me felt a chilling relief, and another, an even greater emptiness. Kim Do-hyun's mission was accomplished. Cheol met me in the apartment days later, his usual calm on his face. "Your mother is out of danger." "Soo-jin," he said, his voice soft. "The treatments worked. She is recovering well." The news, which should have been a balm, barely reached my heart. I was numb. "CEO Kim is satisfied," he continued. "He wants you to know that your sacrifice was not in vain. You have a new life, Soo-jin, a life of freedom." But what kind of freedom was this? I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was not Soo-jin, the girl who washed cars with simple dreams. Nor was she Lee Ji-eun, the ruthless heiress. I was an amalgam of the two, a complex shadow marked by the battles I fought and the lies I lived. The soul I feared I had sold had not disappeared. It had been forged in fire, hardened but also wounded. I had saved my mother, fulfilled my part of the agreement. But at what cost? I had become a weapon, a tool. The simple life I dreamed of seemed a distant fairy tale. The world of luxury and power, which I had infiltrated, had changed me forever. I couldn't go back to what I was before, but I also couldn't continue to be who I had become. Kim Do-hyun's war had ended, but my own internal war was just beginning. I was free, yes, but free for what? For whom? The answer was not in any of Cheol's plans, in any of Do-hyun's strategies. It was in me, in the woman looking at herself in the mirror, ready to discover who she truly was, beyond the disguises and missions. I was Soo-jin, and it was time to build a new path, one that was truly mine.